Login accepted.
Hello everyone, thank you for being here. I'm really happy to be here. To be honest, that's my first time in Poland, so I'm really happy to discover your nice country. Today I'm here to talk about Angular, and more precisely, all the new feature that has been released in the last few months. I'm gonna be honest, I cannot go through too deep in everything because there is a lot there. So I had to cut some stuff. And before we go further, how many of you are using Angular 17 or 18? A couple of hands, right? People using 15 or 16? Okay, still a couple of hands. How many of you are using something older than 12? Okay, you guys need to move up and do update because there is a lot of cool stuff with Angular, and you should really enjoy it and not being stuck with those old things. My name is Magnette. I'm a senior developer for a Belgian consultancy company. I'm also the father of a little, almost 3 years old little girl. And I'm also one of the co-organizers of the Belgian Java user group because I'm a Java developer that knows a lot about Angular, basically. You have all my social networks down there. If we want to get in touch or you have a question, don't hesitate. And let's get it started. Before diving into the new feature, one thing I want to touch is Zone.js. Why? Because all the recent changes in Angular are basically related to Zone.js in a way or another. Zone.js, how many of you knows about Zone.js? Just a couple of hands, okay. So for those who don't know about Zone.js, Zone.js is in Angular since Angular 2, basically, since the beginning. And that's the magic behind the auto refresh of your page when something changes. It's the thing that does all the auto change detection for you. It's great, you're gonna say it works well, your Angular app hopefully works well, but that's not the most efficient tool ever. Just to give you an idea, if you have a classic tree of components, and you have your parent component with some children component, and then again some children component there, and for some reason you change something in your parent, Zone.js might be tempted to say, okay, my parent has changes, so I need to notify the children and the grandchildren, and everybody gonna refresh at some point, even if the change in the parent has nothing to do with your children or grandchildren. So you can clearly see that's not the most efficient way to refresh things. But to be able to do those things efficiently, you need to do some change in Angular, because over the years, everything was based on Zone.js. The first thing they had to change is control flow. We are all familiar with the ngIf, ngFor, ngCase, and switch. But all those things are built on Zone.js. They are tightly coupled to Zone.js, basically. So you cannot go without Zone.js for those things. So we wanted to remove Zone.js. We had to wonder, do we try to uncouple Zone.js and all our directives, or we try to do something new, and maybe along the way getting some new things? And that's basically what they did. They create a new control flow syntax that is not tied to Zone.js, but can still work with Zone.js. So that way, when you want to remove Zone.js, it will work, but as long as you're using it, it's still working. And you also get some performance improvement from those changes, because as anybody, when you refactor or you rewrite something, usually you try to make it better. To show you how it works, and because that's the way I learn best, is I like to read code and see the code in action. So I will not show you demos on the screen like in PowerPoint and let you read it. We're going to do it in a real application, so you can see how it works. So, as I say, I have a little daughter, and she's really fan of dinosaurs. So all my demos are going to be dinosaur-based, sorry. And I have a small application where I can see a lot of dinosaurs, and I can see all the details on that. So if I go in my Angular project, I have here the page that basically lists all these dinosaurs, all these cards, and and that's not the right component, yeah, but we can go to it right now. And as you might imagine, I have a good old ng4 to repeat to all those dinosaurs I get. With the new control flow syntax, you're going to change that to an @4, and you're going to say dino of dino, and it's an observable, so I can still use my good old pipe in that. There's nothing breaking there. And I'm going to wrap everything there. I'm going to remove my good old ng4. And as you might be able to see, it's not too happy about my for loop there. And there is a reason. A couple of versions ago in the ng4, they added a track by function that allows the ng4 to better know how to track change in different lines. But that was optional because ng4 was there for a long time and they didn't want to break everything. With the new syntax, you can basically put all the requirements you want. And that's what they did. Now you have a required track function. It's not a function, it's basically you can give just a property on the object to better refresh everything here. And so here I'm just gonna say, okay, track my change my object on this field. Here it's the ID, obviously. So obviously nothing changed. I can refresh, nothing changed. I just changed the syntax. But I think one good thing of this syntax is, as a developer, we are familiar with for, if, switch case, and things like that. So our brain, when it reads that, it clearly see, oh, that's a for. I know what is it. When it was an ng4, you need to look in an HTML tag. That's not that easy, and you might miss some things. I'm going to go deeper. Here I have that's the little card here that displays a lot of things. And I've basically did the switch case to display what type of dinosaur is it. Is it a carnivorous, an herbivorous, or something else? And previously with the ngIf, if you wanted to do if, else if, if, it was quite cumbersome. It was not that easy to do. But again, we have a new syntax, so it gets easier. So I can simply say, okay, I'm going to take my dino type here. Say it needs to be equal to herbivorous, for instance. And basically, I can put those little emojis there. And I can also do then an else if and do another condition. And I can go on like that as long as I want. And again, I think it's way easier for anybody to read that than this old ngIf stuff that you need to find where is the else template put, because some developer put it at the end of your component and you have a big component and you're looking, what's that template? I don't know. So in this case, I'm going to just change it to this, copy paste those emojis, and if everything works well, we see 2 lines because I still the old switch case thing, but basically it's working. And as you might guess, there is also @switch that does exactly what you expect from a switch case. So you can open and say @case and provide all the case you want there, and return what's required. I'm going to change that. And of course, you have a @default, like in any good switch case. And you can basically do the same thing again for my example here. And I removed simple quotes here. There. And if everything works well, in a second we should be able to see that everything's working. So you have this new syntax. That's really cool, but I imagine nobody amongst you want to go into your project that's 5 years old and go change everything by hand. I sure don't want to do that. So there is a little trick to do that. It's an Angular schematics that allows you to migrate automatically your existing syntax, all those ngif, ngFor, to the new syntax. You might still need to do some adjustment on that, but basically it will migrate everything for you. You might wonder, okay, what's the interest of doing such a thing? My project is working, I don't care. As I said, you will gain in performance just by migrating to these new control flows. The for loop is way more efficient than was the ngFor, for instance. So you will just gain by migrating some performances. And I think that's pretty nice. As I am on the topic of new syntactic stuff, and that's really near the control flow syntax, they added what they call differable views. So the goal behind that is sometimes you want to lazy load part of your application, some components and things like that. Previously, you could do that using the router. You could load a component later, and that would be nice, but that was not that fine-grained because you need the router and just a part. If you wanted to go further, you need to do some writing of codes, trying to figure out how you can do manually, but that was not really nice to do. So nobody were doing it. So they found we can do better. And basically they build on top of this new control flow syntax. And basically, if I go in this little description, you will see that under here I have a placeholder. In a couple of seconds, it's going to change to a loader. And then finally, load my AVIC component here. What's happening behind that? If I go in the components, if I have a small block here, and I will go through it, the first thing you need to know is there is this new add defer. The goal of this defer is to say, I'm going to defer the loading of this part of the application. I can say, just leave it like that, without any parameter like I have here. And basically what it will do is, I will try to load this part when I'm idle, when I do nothing. But you can give him a timer to say, okay, I want to load it after 5 seconds. You can say, I want to load it when my user reaches some point in my web page. You can say, I want to display it when any condition, basically. So it will only load this part of the application at that moment. With this defer, there's other option next to it. There's a placeholder. The idea of the placeholder is to say, I'm going to display something until my component is loaded. Just to say there's something there. Then there is the loading. The loading is there to say, while I'm loading this new part of the application, this component, I'm going to display that specific element. And then there is the error if something goes wrong. Just to recap the life cycle of this defer block, what's going to happen is first you're going to have the placeholder. And at the moment that we start loading this new AVIC component, we will go through the loading tag. And then if it's successfully loaded, you will see the block that's in the defer. If there is an error, you will see the error. Let me show you live. So it's gonna load something here. So it's the placeholder. And then, as you can see, it's trying to load a chunk here. So your new component, your AVIC component in my case, is loaded after the rendering. So basically, it allows you to reduce your bundle size. So it's better performance-wise. And you load it only when you need it. Same if I do the same thing and disable my internet for a second, and I'm not able to do it right away, and go offline. It's trying to load, and I'm pretty sure the styling is not great, but here, and I can zoom a bit, it displays my error message. So if for any reason something goes wrong, I can say to the user, sorry, something went wrong. You don't need to play with some magic loader of loading stuff to display an error. Here it's done for you. Another thing that you need to be careful about the defer block. Who's using view child or stuff like that here? A couple of hands. If you're using view child on those elements, it won't work because it's default loading, it's not supported. That's something some people start to complain because we would like to be able to go in that with view childs. It's not possible at the moment. Another thing you need to be careful, that's supposed to be an heavy component, so something that takes time to load. And if in any other component there is something really heavy to load, basically you undone everything you're trying to do with the default block. So those placeholder loading stuff should be really light elements, not something really heavy that you need to load. So that's for deferrable view. That's really a nice tool if you want to improve performances and things like that on your web app. The next topic, and that's a big one to be honest, it's signals. So signals are a new primitive type added to Angular since Angular 16, if I remember correctly. And to explain it, I have a little example. So a signal, basically, you can see as a box. And usually when you have a box, you want to put something in it. In my case, a dinosaur. And how can I do that? I'm going to basically say I have a new signal of type dinosaur, and I'm going to pass the value in this basically constructor. It's not the constructor, but just creating that. So I've put my dinosaur in it. I probably want to get it back at some point. So what I will do is call the dino with the parentheses. A way to remember this is you can think basically when you take a box and you want to open it, you do this. That's basically a move of the parentheses. But until then, if you're a bit aware of that, it looks like just a wrapper because you put something in it and you get it back. There's nothing new there and nothing useful. And that's where is the trick in the signals. When you open that box, you basically trigger an alarm that will say, I'm interested in the next update of this specific signal, and only the next update. If you are familiar with Eric.js, it looks really similar to a behavior subject, but the big difference is with a behavior subject, when you subscribe on it, you get all the new updates on it. With a signal, you only get the next one. And if you want the next one, you need to keep using those parentheses. I just touched on Eric.js, so I'm just going to put this warning here. Signals won't replace Eric.js. That's two different things. Eric.js is there to do asynchronous stuff, so orchestration of asynchronous task, get the latest response, cancel request or something like that. Where signals are synchronous, they are great to get derived state, to have local reactive state. So there are really two different things. But of course, they can work with each other because otherwise it would be really painful. So I'm going to go back in my code and show you what we can do. I'm first going to show you, and I will reactivate my network here. Otherwise, it won't work. So first thing I want to show you, I have a little heart next to the dinosaur. And I would like, when I click on it, to increase the little label on top to say, I like this dinosaur. So if I go back in my card, you will see that I have already a method to say click on it. But for now, the badge is just a 0. So what I'm going to do is define a new signal. That I'm going to call like count. It's going to be a simple number here. And I'm going to give the value 0. So that's just my signal defined. When I want to increase the value of that. So when you have a signal, there is two methods to update the value of a signal. There is a set, and basically the set is just you provide a value and you don't care about anything. And then there is the update, and in the update you get the previous value. So I will take the update, take the value, and basically say the value plus 1 is my new value. You need to be careful when you do updates, especially if you have an object instead of a simple number. You will need to create a new object. You cannot do mutability here, so you really need to create a new object. So now I have that. I will quickly just bind my signal here so we can see this new value. And only now if I click on it, you can see that the number is increasing for every click I do. So that's already a basic use for a signal. But I will go further than that. I would like to, when I click on this heart, to have a little snack bar to tell me, oh, this dinosaur has been liked. To do that, I will need, of course, the snack bar. That's a material component, so I can basically inject it. Is there anybody not familiar with this inject function? A couple of hands. Okay, that's something that has been added in Angular 15, I think. Basically, it allows you to inject either in the constructor or in your property, so you need to be in a specific life cycle to use it, but it allows you to inject any dependency. You could also do that in resolvers, guards, and things like that. So that's a really nice trick. I'm going to define the constructor here, and I'm going to use a special function called effect. So an effect is basically a function that is being called when a specific signal is triggered. And how does it know which signal needs to be, which signal is important is basically in the core of the function here. And in this case, I'm going to just call this mat snack bar and say I want to open something, and I will put a nice message in there. So basically, I can use the dinosaur name here and say it has been liked a couple of times. And because I'm using here the signal on the like count, the effect knows, okay, if the like count is updated, I need to be triggered. But there is some caveat with that. Of course, if you put more than one signal, it will trigger in any case where one of the signals is updated. But if you put some if-else condition in there, and for some reason the condition goes false, and you call the signal just in the if body, the first time it's going to work properly, but the next time, as I said, signals, you say, okay, I want to get the next update, but because it's false, I will not trigger that, and I will not get this update, so you need to be careful. Another thing you need to be careful in effects, by default, you cannot update a signal in an effect for an obvious reason, because if you update a signal in the effect, you will trigger again the effect, and you could create basically infinite loop. So by default, it's disabled. There is an option to enable it, but I would recommend don't do that. That's probably the safe way to do it. So why I've already done that? Because first time I've set the value, it already triggered the effect, and now every time I'm going to click, you will see this updated. I will move on this little search bar. So what I've put there is simply a filtering tool. I would like to filter all the dinosaurs I get. And we'll use signal to do that, as you might guess. So I go back in the list. And basically, right now, I have an ng model. And I have a change to say, okay, I want to do something there. When I create the demo, it creates me a function, but it's not going to be a function. The search term is going to be a signal. So it's a simple signal of type string with a default value that's going to be empty. I'm going to, when the term change, I want to update my signal. So This time I'm going to use the set because I don't care about the previous value. And that way I've basically mapped my search term so it's properly updated. What I would like now is to filter my list of dinosaurs. So right now my list of dinosaurs is just coming from a service. And I would like to have a filtered dinosaurs list. So I'm going to define a specific kind of signal called computed. So I want to compute automatically the value of this signal based on other signals. In this case, basically the filter name I received. So it's going to return a dino list, of course. And I'm going to import this too. And of course, I need a function to do that. But the first thing I need is basically to get this dinosaur as a signal, because I need that. And that's where I'm going to show you basically how you can convert an observable to a signal. And you're going to be surprised that's really simple. You just say toSignal, and now you have a signal instead of an observable. That's really easy, and you don't need to do. You just need to be careful, because by definition, it can either be the object you received or undefined, because your signal could return nothing. Or your observable could return nothing. So now that I have that, I can basically compute it. I can call this .dinos and get the value. Then, yeah, it's not going to be happy because it can be undefined. And apparently, I cannot find my keyboard when I'm doing presentation now. It's going to be nice. Does anybody remember the shortcut to get a pipe in on Mac? Because apparently my brain froze basically right now. I'm on another T. Option, Maj. Oh, apparently it doesn't want. Oh, yeah. That's I'm on the wrong touch key. Okay, so I'm just going to say it's an empty array. And thank you for the help. And I'm going to basically do a filter where I say my value here. I'm going to take the value .name to uppercase, so I don't have to worry about that. And I want it to include my search term and search term. Why don't you find it? Oh, because I did a lot of bad stuff here. And probably this I don't need. I will need to figure this out. Yeah. And say to uppercase. So that's a very long line. Let's make it a bit more readable here. So what I'm doing is basically saying I want a computed value, and this value is going to be just all the dinosaurs that match my filter. And it's every time any of those signals is updated, it's going to be recomputed. So I need to change a few things here. Of course, it's not anymore this, and I don't need the pipe, so I need just to get filtered dinos here. And I think I didn't change one thing in the card. Oh no, that's okay. So normally, if everything works well, I can type something, it's automatic filtering. And I didn't put that, but there is a net empty on the for loop that you can put if you want to have nothing in there to display a nice message to the user. So that's quite easy to do, and it's working out of the box. So that's what are the basic stuff that were included with signals, but we were further in that with signals. Because when you have an Angular component, you have input, you have output, you have two-way bindings, and those stuff were not signals supported at the moment. So we added in 17, and now with 18, we're going further with that. We have new type of signals. So if I take my card here, and I'm not clicking on the right stuff, card, I have right now a simple input here, but I would like to use signal everywhere. And I can do that easily because I know there is a new type of signal called input. Basically, it replaces the @input. I can say it's required. And of course, I need to type it. And because it's required, I don't need to provide a value. I can remove that @input. I'm going to need to replace here my dyno dot with the parentheses. And probably here too, because I need to open that box every time. But basically, it's still working. Apparently, I left a X somewhere, but still working. So I can use inputs as a signal. One good thing about that is you don't need ng unchanged anymore, because you can just use effects. Every time your input is changed, it will be triggered by this effect because it's a signal. Of course, we add output. Let's try to make one. I would like to output the change on the like count. And basically, as I did for the previous one, you can say output and just provide the type of output. Here is going to be simple number. Why don't you get it? Because I missed a character there. And it's really going to be like what you're used to with the @output, because when you call this signal, it has a special signature that makes you feel like you're using basically a good old observable because subject, because you can just do an emit on it. And so I will just gonna do emit the change here. So if I want to display it in the list, I'm gonna bind this to a function and just do something simple here, providing an event. And yeah, it's there. And for now, I'm just do a console.log to display it. I don't want to do something too complicated, but value here. And normally, I don't know if it's readable down there for you in the console, but every time I'm going to click, you will see basically a message appearing because the output is working. So that's, I can get an input, I can emit an input or an output, but there's still two-way binding to do. And they added also a new primitive for that. If I go back to the card, I can basically now, instead of saying my like count is a signal, I'm going to say it's a model. Again, a new type of signal. And I can say, okay, it needs to be required, and it's going to be a type number. If I can type today. That way, and yeah, it's because it's not the right place there. Need to be here. I can remove basically my output. I can remove that. Go back to my list. And now I can basically say, okay, it's going to be a like count, and I'm going to two-way bind it, just like you used to do it with the banana in a box syntax. And I'm going to provide a signal here. And it's going to be, as you can see, it says writable signal because I can write in it. There is read-only signal, such as computed stuff and things like that. And basically, I'm going to say that's a signal. And I'm going to put the value 0 in it. And yes, you can import, and you don't need that. I don't need all this stuff. And normally, everything going to work. You will see that every counter is increasing because I share the same value for all of them. But basically, I have two-way bindings now with signals, something we didn't have before. This means that we're almost good to use signals everywhere. Almost, because all the library needs to update and support signals, but we're almost there. So in those signals, we've gone through a lot of things. We got the basic signal, we've seen the computed, the effect, and now the input, the output, and the models. That's a lot of new signals. But the best way to learn how to use it is basically to use it. You will learn a lot of that doing that, because I have a colleague of mine that started using it, and you would be surprised. The first thing he tried is to update a signal in the effect, and it was like, I don't get it. It's not working, and my breakpoint is not going there. Doesn't make sense. Yeah, because by default effects are not allowing to set a signal. So basically, the best way to learn those things is to practice. I'm going to move on to zone again, because those signals are opening the way to get rid of zone, basically. We don't need a zone anymore. But we cannot drop zone like that for a really good reason. Because all our components and all our libraries are not, or probably not, zone signal ready and zoneless ready at the moment. Even material design is not totally ready for that. So even Google is not ready for that. I cannot imagine any open source library you're using to be as ready as Google, where there is paid people to maintain those things. So they introduce two ways to work with zone. The first one is the hybrid one. So we'll support the signals and the good old Zone.js. And they introduce with Angular 18 an experimental zoneless. I put in a red zone experimental because that's really what it is. So you shouldn't put that in production, please. But it's a good way to test how it's working. So again, if you want to try it, it's not that complicated to do. You need to change a bit your config here, because you could provide zone change detection. There is this new event coalescing. I won't go on that, but basically that's still a new stuff, and you need to try it and not be sure it's going to work for everybody. But if you want to try the zoneless, you need to remove this line. Say provide, and it's quite obvious because it's called experimental zoneless change detection. And that way you enable zoneless, but you need to change another thing. It's in your Angular JSON, and you need to remove the polyfill for Zone.js. So this part. And when you've done that, I'm going to restart because I changed the Angular JSON. And it's already there. I'm still not used to how fast a MacBook Pro with M chip is I really not. And basically, in my case, everything is still working. But if you have something more complex and I have big project, I wouldn't do that on them, because I'm pretty sure I'm going to click 3 times and everything's going to fall down. But you can try it and see, okay, am I ready for that? That's the way to test everything. So it's there for 18. It's going to be moving forward, probably, hopefully, be in preview in 19. But for now, it's just experimental. So with all those signals, there is an ID that's running since basically Angular 16, I think. It's a signal-based component. What are signal-based components? It's components that are just using signals. No more ngZone, no more basic input and things like that. We're just using signals. And because of all I showed you, we are nearly there. We could hopefully get that in 19. And it's going to be probably just like for standalone, a flag to say it's a signal component. And we should have better feature, better behavior with that. But it's just in the pipeline, and now we have all the bricks that coming down to do it. We could imagine getting it in the future. One thing to notice with Angular 18, the documentation has been moved to angular.dev, not the angular.io. So when you try to search for documentation for the latest version, go on this website, not on the previous one. I think now there is a banner to say that's deprecated, please move to angular.dev. So there is a new documentation, hopefully better than the previous one. And that's where I'm going to wrap up this talk. You might get the feeling of this guy having a lot of things coming, all those change with inputs and signals, and that's totally okay. There is a lot of new features, and you don't need to use it everywhere at the moment. You can use it at your own rhythm and try it and see how it's working, how you can use it, and basically get familiar with those things and see how you can reuse it and how you can leverage some new power with all those new features. They are not magical. You can really go deep and learn how it's working. And as someone said to me, it feels like you're going to go really fast on all those things, but if you just zoom in, you're going to feel that it's a lot slower than it first looks like. The good thing is Angular is evolving. What's worse than a language that does not evolve or framework does not evolve? Basically, if you see a framework that does not evolve, it feels like it's going to be dead in a couple of years. So here we have something that's really evolving. It feels like we're going to have a new version kind of Angular when all those changes are totally stable. A bit like you would have an Angular version 3 in a way, but it's not 3 because everything is backward compatible, and I think they learned their lessons from AngularJS. But basically, we are changing and evolving in a way that allows us to keep it at our own rhythm, but still use new stuff, new efficiency stuff, and that's really, really nice, I think. And all that, for me, give you a bright horizon for Angular. A lot of people always compare Angular with React, saying, React is faster, it's better, it's lightweight, and things like that. With all those new features, there is benchmark coming out showing that Angular can outperform React at this moment. With all those new control flow syntax, with the defer view and things like that, we can basically be better than React with Angular. And I know that's not going to be... people won't be happy about that because Angular is like these big frameworks, and in JS world, people don't tend to really like frameworks. As a Java developer, we love that because we're familiar with that, and it's been a lot of years we're using frameworks. But JS, they like to move fast and drop everything and go on. And that's not what Angular is doing, basically. But they provide basically what's really useful for an enterprise, because we want something that's maintainable, that evolves well, that doesn't break every new release. That's something you would like. So that's really something I think makes Angular really have a real bright future, because we're evolving at steady pace, but without breaking everything every release. I would like to remind you to rate the talk, give me feedback. I really would like to do that because nobody is perfect and everybody wants to learn, I hope. So that's a way for me to learn. There is the QR code here. It gives you access to the GitHub repo with all the demo I showed you, and there is also a link to the slide in the GitHub repo, so you can access all those resources. Those are my links again if you want to get in touch and talk about things, or if you have an issue. I've recently did the migration from Angular 10 to 17, so for those people stuck with old version, if you have an issue, you can ping me if you have something. I have here some Belgian chocolate for those who like that, and some stickers also, so feel free to come by, chat, take some chocolates and everything. Thank you for your attention. If you have a question, that's the right time too.